Hello, poultry keepers. We are here tonight with Frank Reese. We posted some stuff online looking for some suggestions on what type stuff people wanted to learn about. And we had a ton of folks that were looking for information about breeding heritage birds, whether it be how to set your barn up, how to line breed and continue what you needed to do and all of that. And I couldn't think of anybody else better than Frank Reese to tell us about it. And when I reached out to him and he said, sure, I was like, he's in a really good mood because he just retired. So I'm super glad to have you on tonight.
Thank you.
Couple of the questions that I had. First off, tell us a little bit about you and the livestock conservant. Not that the my mind just went blank. The conservancy that you have. I'm a member and I can't
Okay.
even think of the name.
Good Shepherd Conservancy.
That's it. Good Shepherd Conservancy. I apologize for that.
That's fine. I've been raising poultry all my life. I'm just in Kansas alone where I live. I'm fourth generation. I was born into this. And I mean, grandparents and great grandparents, everybody had poultry. It was just part of living on a farm. We had cattle, hogs, everything. And everybody, all the kids, all of us were in 4-H and everything. And I was one of the younger kids, so I got sent to the barn and to take care of the chickens.
Mm-hmm.
And so I proceeded to tell my dad, I said, I know him. So that was my first exposure, but of trying to improve and get better and better birds. And of course, joined the American Poultry Association very young. But then also the important part is I began to meet back then, every little town in the country had a hatchery and were being supplied eggs by breeders. So I began to meet as many of the breeders that I could, and that's where I began to learn what it took to improve poultry and to maintain. And back then, because it was just a different world. I mean, if you wanted new hamps, you knew who had the best. If you wanted barred rocks, you knew who had the best. If you wanted Jersey Giants, you knew where to go. Because back then there was people that dedicated their lives to those particular breeds and varieties. And not only did those chickens or turkeys or whatever win at the shows, more importantly, they also won at the market. They were still good egg layers. They were still decent meat producers. And so just like every other animal on the farm, they had to work to survive. The animals had to provide an income to the farm.
Yep.
So the conservancy was established, I don't know. The older I get, what seems like yesterday was 10 years ago. Um, the conservancy itself and building the building has been a dream of mine to try to do education and research. And it's been a very, very long haul to make it happen. And it's finally beginning to happen this year. In fact, the very day I retired from the hospital work, I got a message saying that we had been given the grant that we've been hunting for to begin to do research. And so I'm working with 2 universities and the Land Institute here in Kansas and our conservative to begin to do research. We're going to start with egg production in what heritage, or what I call standard bred breeds of chickens. begin to develop. Well, part of it's going to be 2 or 3 different studies, but one of them is going to be using some of the new grains that they're coming out with to try to get away from the use of soy and a few things. So anyway, that's what the conservancy is about.
That's
This is the
absolutely
task
awesome.
that used to be done at all your land grant universities, but they don't do it anymore because there's no money. You
Right.
know, all your land grant universities, and I'm not saying this is bad or anything, but they get their money and research from the big guys. You know, um, whether it be Tyson or Purdue or Cargill or whoever. Is
Right.
paying those universities to produce students to work for the major corporations. There's not a lot of money in backyard chickens.
That's very true. Um, so with that, what makes a breed heritage or standard? When you said that you refer to it as standard, that's the way I've always been told to refer to them as well, because it's standard bred. Not a lot of people want to use the marketing term heritage, but it's standard poultry.
Yeah, and that's what it is. The bad thing about using the word heritage um, is it has no backing, has nothing behind it, no organization or history that can come in and label that as a heritage. I was at the meeting 15 years ago or 20 years ago, whatever, because I've also been a member of the Livestock Conservancy almost since its founding. And we had a meeting in Virginia Tech pertaining to turkeys. It was all about turkeys, and that's my main thing and always has been. That's why they brought me in. And they started calling them heritage turkeys. And I begged them for 2 days not to do that, but they did it anyway. So it became a huge marketing thing. But with the help now of the Livestock Conservancy, we have written definitions of what a heritage is. And to call a chicken or a turkey heritage, it must be a known breed that existed prior to 1950 and has been recognized by the American Poultry Association as a purebred chicken. So that cuts out a lot of these more modern things that have come about. So heritage should be something that is from out of the standards, out of the APA, which has the ability and the past history to identify certain breeds and varieties, but also comes with a standard weight and size and shape and conformation and utility and everything. So when I proceeded to start selling my turkeys, it was, I wanted a USDA label that stated, that this was a bronze or a Narragansett or a bourbon red or whatever turkey. So it took me almost a couple of years and some lawyers working, but now my turkeys are labeled certified standard bred. So I was able to get it past the USDA. So now the USDA and the government has actually accepted our definition of what we would call heritage. So if someone's going to market them as heritage and get a label from the USDA that identifies the meat in the package as heritage, the USDA has accepted our definition.
That's awesome. So what what does it take to set all that up, to start a heritage flock, to be able to do what you're doing, obviously on a smaller scale, because And I've seen pictures of your yard and your farm where you have your hundreds and hundreds of turkeys, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, we'll do 10,000 turkeys this year for
Holy mess.
Thanksgiving.
That's a lot.
And I sold 26,000 fertile turkey eggs. I
That's
always tell
incredible.
people it all depends on what it is you want the bird to do. Do you want it to feed you and your family? Do you want it to feed you and a few neighbors? Do you want the bird to produce enough meat or eggs to pay for its own feed? Uh, and are they just pets? You know, it's sort of like you keep a dog and you spend all this money on the dog because you love the dog and you just want the dog. So, you know, you have to decide ahead of time what it is you want the bird to do. I've always told people if you want to do it and not go broke, you have two choices. You stay very small and you raise the chickens or the turkeys that you want. You dress them yourself. And so, and in most states, at least I know here in Kansas or in most states that I know of, you can hand dress them and sell them directly to friends and neighbors.
Hmm.
And the majority of the cost of marketing poultry for meat is the feeds course number one, and then number two is processing. Um, because if you got just 100 chickens and you're going to have them processed, and if you pay $10 a bird to have them processed and packaged and inspected, you're already in the hole.
Yep.
So unless you can get people to pay you a fortune for those birds. Um, so if you sit down and put the numbers to it, you know, it makes it really difficult. But if you can process the birds yourself and sell them directly, and if you can sell them for $3 or $4 a pound, you should at least do all right. Now, what I've always done all these years is, especially with chickens, because chickens are far more difficult than turkeys um, to market as meat birds. If you get a really good dual production breed, a breed of chicken that is capable of laying 180, 200 eggs a year, and you gather those eggs, you hatch them yourself. You don't go out and buy the chicks, but you hatch them yourself, and you raise them and feed them, and you process them yourself. The eggs you sell should pretty well pay for all the feed, and your profit's going to be off your dressed birds. But you have to pick a breed or variety of standard bred chicken that can meet that demand. Um, and you got to get your hands on quality um, heritage chickens that will meet that requirement. Um, some of the hatcheries that are around today are beginning to realize that, and more people are wanting better and better quality when it comes to their dual production. I know the dress weight and the standard weight of New Hamps, of Delawares, of Barred Rocks, of Buff Orpingtons, um, of Rhode Island Whites, and of the Cornish game. These are all varieties that we have raised in great numbers for a number of years. And I've done all the breeding and selecting and improving in the birds. And so you've got to know exactly what they're capable of. So you got to, you know, if you can't get your hands on some type of quality standard bred chickens, um, if you're going to try to breed and improve them yourself, you can do that, but you better plan on at least a good 5 to 10 years breeding and selecting to get to where you probably want to go. And I always tell people, we'll start with barred rocks. You can buy barred rocks from 10 different places and they will all be different.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever you get, a Rhode Island Red, a New Hamp, a barred rock, whatever, it is no better than the breeder behind it. When people tell me barred rocks will do this and this and this, that's not true. Those barred rocks are no better than what the breeder behind them selected that particular variety to do. If they selected for pure egg production, you're probably going to get a skinny barred rock. If they selected for heavy meat production, you're probably going to have really poor egg production. You've got to know whatever it is you choose. You've got to go to that source that you got your birds from and ask them what they were selected for, what they were capable for.
That makes sense. What? So let's say somebody was gonna start and they wanted to pick out a bird that meets that. What are some standard breed birds that will consistently lay that 200 egg per year? What are some of those that you would choose?
New Hamps, they're excellent, and they have a dressed weight. If you get a really good old standard New Hamp, they'll be ready to process in 12, 14 weeks. They'll dress out 3.5, 4 pounds, and those hens will lay 180, 200 eggs a year if you manage them well. Barred rocks, they'll do the same thing, but their growth rate is more like 15, 16 weeks before they get to what we consider marketable weight. You've got it. The reason why weight is important is that whatever breed of chicken you have, the most money you invest in that chicken is going to be in the first 5 weeks. The incubation, the hatching, and the feed and so on to get them started. That last half of their life, especially the last 3 or 4 weeks of their life, they're really putting on the muscle mass and so on. So you got to know at what point. Now, if you don't have quality barred rocks or quality New Hamps and you kill them at 16 weeks, they may only weigh 2.5 pounds.
Right.
Because they haven't been selected for that standard weight. Another one's the Delaware. There's some excellent Delawares. There's a few breeders that are doing very well with Buckeyes. The Wyandottes, some of the Wyandottes there's some excellent Wyandottes out there. You just have to, traditionally, historically, if you go back and look at what was being raised through the 20s and 30s and 40s and up until in the 50s, and all this disappeared, 90% of the broiler chickens being raised in the United States were barred Plymouth Rocks. They were king. By the 1940s, they slowly got replaced by the New Hamps. And the New Hamps started taking over and the barred rocks started losing ground very quickly. And by the 1960s, they were all gone. So, but these were chickens that were being raised on multiple farms, not in big buildings, but multiple farms, and have a history of doing very well at doing what I would call dual production. Now, there's some varieties like the Jersey Black Giant that was developed that is a fairly decent egg layer, maybe 160, 180 eggs a year, but they'll lay a really large egg. But they were never considered a good frying chicken. It's like the Brahma. The Brahmas used to be raised, the light Brahmas used to be raised in large numbers for the market. But the Brahmas and the giants were raised for a roasting market and to be killed at 20, 24 weeks and to dress out 5.5, 6 pounds. So you have to decide what is your market, where do you want to sell them, and how you're going to dress them. And that'll determine somewhat on what breeds you pick.
So let's say that I wanted a bird that was a good general purpose bird that I could fry or that I could grill, but would also give me a good number of eggs. Well, what would you recommend someone to go with?
If they're going to fry them or broil them,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so you're talking spring chickens, you're talking dressing them out 3.5 pounds. Um, the problem we've got a little bit is for the last 50 years, the consumer has gotten used to that abnormal dwarf little chicken in the grocery store. That 3.5, 4 pound fryer that they see at the grocery store that was killed when it was 6 weeks old. That is what they have considered as normal. And when they look at my chickens, which have no dwarf gene in them, my chickens have longer keel bones, longer legs, and bigger wings. That's a normal chicken. It hasn't been dwarfed through the dwarf gene. So you've got that to face. Also, if you look at all of the old cookbooks back prior to 1950, fryer chickens like my mother fried all weighed 2.5, 3 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's part of what you got to face a little bit. But if you want something that's somewhat competitive, not too far off from what they're probably used to seeing at their local grocery store, probably the new hamp is going to be your best. And I worked really hard to develop a really good line of Delaware. That's very, first, what is a Delaware? A Delaware chicken is developed by crossing barred rocks and new hams. That's how you get a Delaware. But if you cross Delawares, you can breed Delaware, and keep getting that Columbia pattern. That's what it is. It's a Columbia pattern with barring in the black. So, but the reason we did is we have a lot of people wanted a white feathered bird. It's a little easier for them to clean and to dress than a dark feathered bird. So the Delaware, I think, has done pretty well. But the thing about it is, you're going to have to develop them yourself, and you're going to have to learn how to maintain them.
Gotcha.
And we have lots and lots of growers in this country. We have very few breeders, very few people that are breeding quality birds.
That is that is such a true statement. There's a lot of people that will hatch out birds and hatch out birds. They don't even know what culling is or what to look
Yeah.
for.
It's like I tell people, how do you walk? Of course, I'm talking more turkeys, but how do you walk into a flock of 5,000 barred rocks or 5,000 bronze turkeys and pick out the top three? And why? What is it you're looking for? So, like when we get ready to this fall to do our 8,000 turkeys for Thanksgiving, it'll be my job to pick out the top 100 toms. Because I know that those toms that I pick will determine next year and the next year and the next year the quality of my turkeys. And I got to pick out, 1,000 hens also. So you got to know what you're doing. Or when you walk into a flock of barred rocks or Delawares or new hens, which ones do you send to market and which ones you keep? And so then you've got to decide, then you've got to learn what qualities affect what things. If you have poor egg production, a lot of people focus on the hens, but it's actually the rooster that carries the genetics genes to improve egg production. So you have to know the lineage of your roosters. Was that rooster's mom a good egg layer? Because he's going to pass that on to his daughters. So it's getting to know your flock, know your roosters, know their lineage and where they came from. And that'll give you some idea of, when you ask that question, which I appreciate, if I wanted 800 eggs a year, what breed would I suggest? To me, it's more than just saying new hamps. It's saying
Mm-hmm.
whose new hamps? What line of new hamps are you getting?
That
When
was
people
actually going to
call
be
and
my
tell
next
me they
question.
have barred rocks or new hamps or whatever, the first thing I always ask them, I say, whose do you have? Because that will tell me real fast if they've got a mess or if they need to start over or whatever, because some of these varieties and lines that are being sold that are out there, mercy, 10 years, you couldn't improve them. Because a lot
Wow.
of them have leg or blood in them. The industry has crossed them over and put barred feathers on a little chicken that's built like a leghorn. They call it a barred rock because it's got barred feathers.
Right. And they want that egg laying capacity that the leghorns have.
So Frank, where does
Yeah,
somebody
and so they're
go?
excellent egg layers. But you can't feed a barred rock chicken for 16 weeks and have it dress out at 2 pounds and go anywhere. You're going to go in the hole. I mean, you can eat it, but you'll have a heck of a time selling it.
That makes
You can
sense.
eat anything. You can eat a 10-year-old rooster. You just got to know how to cook it.
Right. So that brings me to two questions. Number one, where would somebody go? Let's say they figured out what they want to do and you recommend the new hamps. Where would I go to get the best new hamps to start my project or my homestead with?
That's such a hard question. Um, the
I mean, I
problem
would
we've
think
got
Good
today
Shepherd
in the
Poultry Farms.
APA is if you go to a chicken show today,
Mm-hmm.
most of the new hams that are being shown, I wouldn't drag home um, because they are now selecting for big fancy feathers. And like I was
Yep.
taught as a kid, you don't eat the feathers.
Right.
Um, and so that makes it really difficult. And then also, they imported a bunch of new hams from Germany a number of years ago, and a lot of these new hamps that they have at shows now look nothing like the new hamps that I had 60 years ago as a kid. And so it gets really difficult. Um, Sometimes when people ask me, because I get that question a lot, my first thing I'll ask them is where do you live? And I can often find somebody close by, um, because there are a few people that still got good new hams in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, in Nebraska, down Texas. Um, there's some decent ones back in California and Idaho. I always tell people, try to buy from a local breeder if at all possible. Spend time talking to that breeder, find out what it is that they're doing and what issues and problems they have with their particular line. Um, I'm from the old school. I think a chicken that wins on the farm, wins in the market, should win in the show ring as well. That's the way I was taught. There shouldn't be any difference between a show chicken and a farm chicken. But some of that is getting, I'm sure when I was a kid, all the people, men and women who taught me, I'm sure I drove them crazy with 50 million questions, but that's how you learn.
Yeah.
Also, if you keep a small flock, you know, not keep the amount of birds that I keep, but if you're keeping a small flock, then and if you're new at what you're doing, don't go buying chickens from other people and bring them in. Go try, if you find a line that you like, like when I was a kid, Golda Miller had the best black Jersey giants in the nation. So every year, for as long as that woman was alive, I bought eggs from her and hatched them. I never bought from anybody else. I was proud that the line of Jersey Giants I had were pure Golda Miller line. And I knew exactly what it was to look like, what they were capable of doing. So, but a lot of people, now that she's gone, I have to keep a really large number to be able to maintain the line. And so, um, if you're going to get a line, after you've done it for 10 or 15 years and you really know your birds and you know that breed, you know that conformation, you know what they're capable of doing, you could go and get something outside of your line and bring them in, but just be really diligent and calling and getting rid of the birds that will not improve your flock. When I used to talk to Ed Buss at Penn State, Dr. Ed Buss, he was the head geneticist at Penn State. When they would go to improve a line, this is back in the 40s and 50s, they would keep 40, 50,000. That's how many they felt they had to have to be able to improve a line. Now, I've been able to do it with under 600, like Barred Rocks, between 400 and 600 hens, and I've been able to maintain and keep the line going and keep enough genetic diversity because there was no place for me to go get anything new. And so, I mean, mine are the old Ralph Stern bloodline that goes way back. Turkeys, you need to keep around 400, 500 hens. Now, if you're not capable of doing that, then what would be nice is if you can share your bloodline with 2 or 3 or 4 other people, and then you guys share eggs and or share chicks, or maybe you go to your friend every year or two and they'll let you take a rooster and bring a rooster in. But you got to know what a rooster does to a flock, and you got to know what a hen does to a flock. They don't both do the same thing. If you want to improve meat quality, pay attention to your hens. The size of your hens will determine the size of your cockerels. You want to improve egg production, pay attention to your roosters. If you want to improve color or the pattern that your variety has, pay attention to your rooster. He's one that's going to affect that. Overall skeletal structure and health is going to come more from the hen. That's the big mistake a lot of people make with turkeys. Say, well, my toms are all dressing out 20 pounds and my hens are dressing out 10 pounds. And I said, well, you need to get rid of the little bitty hens because it's the turkey hen that determines the size of your toms. And you can breed great big old toms, and if you breed them on little bitty hens, they're still going to stay small because he's just carrying the genes of his mom.
Got it.
But when I was a kid, there was many breeders of Barred Rocks. There was many breeders of New Hamps. There was many breeders of Delawares or Wyandottes or whatever. So, and we all basically had somewhat the same line and from the same background, and so we were able to share roosters or share eggs, and And that's how we were capable of keeping things going at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that's gone today.
Mm. You got something you want to
This
ask,
all
Jeff?
makes
Go ahead.
sense if you're trying to do this and at least maybe break even, if not try to make money. I periodically get calls from people who say, how can I do what you do? Or how can I make money at what you do? It's, if I knew 25 years ago when I started this national market, if I had any idea what it was going to entail, I probably wouldn't have done it. Because it's been really difficult. It's fighting an uphill battle. But now it's finally getting there. And now we have another farm back in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And so we have another breeder farm up in Nebraska. I'm getting old, but it's finally happening. And for the first time this year, finally, we're going to do research. And I'm getting some attention from, and other people because of like what you guys are doing, you're bringing the awareness to this. But if you don't do the work ahead of time, it's like I always tell people when they say they want to do what I do, I say, before you ever get a bird, before you ever build a chicken house, figure out what it is you want to do. If you want to sell meat, if you want to sell eggs, go find out what your market is, what that market's capable of handling. What can you get? My friend back east, he can get twice as much for a dozen eggs as I can. My friend out in Idaho and California, they can get 3 times what I can get for a dozen eggs for eating eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to determine that. And of course, I have a big advantage because I raise thousands instead of just, 20 or 30. I can get my feed for probably a half or a third of what, if you go buy your feed in a bag at the feed store, you're paying a lot of money for a 50-pound bag of feed. Or if you've got to go and have your chickens processed at a small mom and pop processing plant, you're probably paying double what I pay to have chickens or turkeys processed. So I have to figure out, that's the other thing is not only find who's going to buy your birds and where your market is, or what are your state laws and federal laws and regulations, and do I need state inspection? Do I need federal inspections? What is my rules and regulations for state health inspectors and animal inspectors? And do I have to vaccinate, or do I need to test my birds for pleurism and typhoid? Do I need to test for MG? And, the list goes on and on. I spend a lot of money every year just blood testing birds. And so thank goodness I've a really good vet, bless her heart. She's learned about turkey diseases because it's not taught in vet schools much anymore. And so there's a lot to consider. But if you're just going to have a backyard, that's the simplest. If you're just going to raise some quality meat that's better for you, because we've done all the research on that already, doing the research on the difference between my barred rock meat and the new meat and the Cornish meat and what you buy at the grocery store. You can avoid all of that. You can dress your own chickens and feed your family without all the inspections and everything else. But most people at least want something decent looking when they dress it out.
So
Trying to
Frank,
find quality is really difficult.
yeah, Frank, what do you think about the new kind of craze behind the American breast? I mean, there's a lot of people chasing after the American breast chicken as basically the
breeds?
new, yeah.
French breeds,
Well,
I don't know
mean,
much about them.
okay.
From the dress birds I've seen, they don't look any better than my new hamps. They don't look any better than some of the Delawares I've seen. At least my new hamps I've raised. A lot of people also confuse like Freedom Rangers, or I'll get people who'll tell me they have barred rocks or they tell me they have whatever, and I'll go and visit their farm, and they're not. They're just mass produced Cornish white chickens, Cornish rocks that the industry has put barred feathers on.
Yeah.
They still grow in 7 weeks. They just haven't had barred feathers. Totally incapable of natural reproduction. There was the Lavelle which started in France and everything. Of course, now that is owned by Tyson. They bought that label out, and Lavelle isn't a breed. It's whatever. It's more of a way of raising that particular breed.
Right.
They were doing the naked necks and all that. Now, part of the thing is that you can go to Tyson's website and you can pull up all these chickens that they have for sale, and some of them they'll call them heritage, but they're all hybrids of some sort. None of them would ever meet the standards. They have been designed so you cannot reproduce them. They will grow much faster than mine. The American breeds, they had to call them that so they didn't get in trouble with France. I don't see, and people can raise whatever they want. It's a free country. In fact, I'm glad a lot of the people raise these other things because it makes a difference from what I have. To me, the most important thing in raising poultry is what I was taught from the beginning, and that is to raise a balanced animal. And a balanced animal means that reproduction, muscle development, and health and welfare are all in balance. That you don't select one characteristic over another. If you select for massive meat production, you'll have no egg production and you'll have no fertility. If you select for high egg production, if you select for a hen to lay 320 eggs a year, she'll burn out in 2 years and you'll have no muscle mass. And both of those extremes, the high egg production or high meat production, will affect the health and well-being of the animal. So it's very important to me that I still select for the well-being of the animal. And so that means you may get less eggs a year, or you may take you 2 months longer to get them to market weight, but that animal was capable of producing themselves, running, jumping, and flying. And you could take my chickens to any country in the world, they could reproduce themselves and feed that family without any intervention of man. And so, all these chickens that are being sold in the grocery store would disappear without some form of intervention. Electrical, like the modern industrial turkey can no longer naturally mate. And the industrial broiler is almost getting there, where it's going to be really difficult for them to naturally mate if they keep getting those legs shorter and shorter and that breast broader and broader.
It's funny that you bring that up because right now there's 2 universities studying using the human drug metformin for diabetes, okay, to control and limit weight gain so they can extend.
I'm meeting in Arkansas probably 10 years ago, where some of the growers that were raising for one of the big corporations said, what are you going to do about the diabetes? So, this is nothing new. This is an issue that, necrotic endoritis is probably the biggest problem that they have. And that's a direct result of morbid obesity and rapid growth. But what happens is those little chicks are born with hyperthyroidism, and then about 3 weeks or 4 weeks into their development, the pancreas quits producing insulin, and then the chicken gets very fat. I mean, the industrial broiler is a perfect specimen for human research on human obesity and diabetes, because that's what they have.
Well, now they're going the other way. They're going to use metformin to control this, to extend the breeder flock longevity, right? Because they're tired of only
if you only got to raise them for 42 days, if you buy a fried chicken at Colonel Sanders, that chicken was killed in 38 days, because they found out if you kill it 36, 38 days, you can get 10 pieces in a bucket. The Cornish rocks that you buy at the grocery store are a little older, maybe another week. But, they can get a lot of them if if you can totally control their environment. You can probably get the majority of them to market. The breeders are the problem.
Right.
Keeping the breeders alive long enough, they have to put them on a starvation diet to keep them from getting morbidly obese, because the fatter the roosters get or the fatter the hens, then the sperm count is almost nothing. And so, they've got to do something, and so the chickens then begin to consume a lot of water because they're hungry, and so then there's a lot of diarrhea, and the problems go on and on. It's like Dr. Ed Best told me a long time ago from Penn State. He says, what is sad is that we have a poultry scientists today who truly believe that they can outsmart Mother Nature. That whatever, as they begin to produce more and more of these more obese dwarf chickens, that whatever health issues they face, we can find a drug or a vaccine to fix it. And so eventually, Mother Nature will eventually win. You can only push, Dr. Paul Siegel, the head geneticist at North Carolina, said, he says, their genetic diversity is not infinite. There is a limit to which you can push these animals genetically. They've already cut the amount of genetic diversity in the gene pool in half from their ancestor. So that's another whole issue. You probably weren't calling to have me talk about that, but you're right. The metformin's the next step to try to control the diabetes.
Yeah, for the breeder flocks, right? They're trying to get some longevity out of the breeder flock because they can only get, so many eggs out of those pullets or out of those hens, right? They can replace the roosters, right? So they'll replace the roosters 3 times in a breeding flock to keep, in that weight range, but they can't, they can't do that with those hens, right? And by the time they hit 40 weeks old, they can't get them, the egg production falls apart, right? So
they quit laying.
Right. So they're only getting about 20 weeks of lay out of them, which, and that, their breeders are lucky to hit 85% production, they're never going to hit the higher 90s.
It's a nickel and dime business.
Yeah. I mean, but they keep doing it.
And so I know a lot of I've had the heads of Purdue here at my farm. I've had the heads of Tyson, had the heads of Liberty Foods, super kind people. I spoke in Washington at a meeting, Wonderful people. And I understand where they're coming from, and and I've learned a lot from them. It's just not what I do.
Well,
You
I
know,
mean,
I've got hens out there that are 10, 12, 13 years old that are still laying.
yeah, and you can do that,
And
but people don't
yeah, I can
understand
do
it.
that.
But unfortunately, the American
I can
society,
understand it. It just doesn't fit into their system.
well, the public thinks that our food is supposed to be cheap, right? And
Yeah.
so, you know, unfortunately, the U.S. spends the least amount of their earned dollar, their income, on food than any other nation in the world. Okay, right? Of
I've
every
got
dollar they
pictures of
earn,
turkeys. I've got pictures of turkeys being sold at a meat market in the 1930s, and they were 25 a pound, which sounds cheap, but minimum wage, my dad said at that time, was 10 cents. So, but even in the 50s, when turkeys got up to 49 cents a pound, minimum wage was 75 cents. Can you imagine people paying minimum wage per pound for a turkey today?
wouldn't happen. But I mean, that's what you should be getting for your standard bred turkeys. I mean,
Yeah.
truthfully,
Well,
right?
except for
In
what's
order for
happened is
you
the
to,
industry doesn't care about this anymore.
no,
They don't make any money off selling chickens or turkeys to grocery stores. That's not their market. That's more or less their giveaway.
yeah,
They make
it's
all
all
their
in the
money
processed food,
off of, yes.
right?
We're up to
They want to further, yeah,
74% of all broiler meat being raised worldwide goes to the fast food industry.
yeah, chicken nuggets, chicken tenders, something
That's
like
where
that.
all the
Yep,
money is.
yep,
Mm.
It's like turkeys. If you go to Subway or the sandwich shop or the delis and you buy Louis Rich Deli smoked turkey meat, and you're paying $5, $6 for a 6 ounce package, take that times, you know, get it up to a pound, 16 ounces. Now all of a sudden that turkey that you bought at Thanksgiving that you paid 98 cents a pound now went up to $10, $12 a pound. So that's where all the money is. In
yep,
fact, all tom turkeys being raised commercially are now sold for value added because they can get a 40-pound tom in 19 weeks.
yep. It's crazy. It's crazy what they can do.
But, they did what they have to do. It's brilliant. They're making money.
They are, and
Except the
the
birth
average public
control
doesn't know the
is
difference. So we're getting close to
yep.
our time. One question so if people wanted to get your new hamp line, do you sell hatching eggs or do you sell chicks? So
If
if
I'm
somebody
in New
starts,
Jersey, if they go to Good Shepherd website, um, my partner Chad, he will sell Barred Rocks, Delawares, and New Hampshire.
okay,
He
and these are all being
this
selected
time
for the
of
standard.
year, I don't know if he was, this is not the time of year to be buying chicks. Now I'm hatching a
No,
lot of chicks right now, but I've got the facilities to do it all year round. But
Hmm.
hatching right now for our research program. Plus, I don't ship. Um, it's just too, I'm getting too old. I don't want to deal with all that shipping. Um, why, Jed back in New Jersey, or where he's got all the Delawares, New Hampshire Barred Rocks, they all came from me. Um, you know, he's young and his wife is young, and they're doing a really good job. So, and then Blake Bell up in Nebraska has got my Barred Rocks, my New Hamps, and he's also got he's got a number of really nice breeds that him and his wife are working on. They're a young couple. They just had a baby,
mm-hmm.
and he's got a good eye for chickens, and that's what it takes. Not everybody was born with that eye to be able to, walk into a flock and say that's a good bird and that's a bad bird, and if I put that hen with that rooster, this is what I'm going to get, you know.
So if people want your
So
genetics,
that's
they
some
need
of
to
the
come
places
visit you,
that,
right?
I'm sorry, what?
So if people want your genetics, they need to come visit you in Kansas.
In the spring at this point, not right now.
Okay. All right.
But we're probably going to have a bunch of them for sale after research. But that'll be this time next year, because the egg production research we're doing, we've planned will take 9 to 10 months. And we'll start in April. So next December, we'll probably have a bunch of barred rocks, and I've got a really nice flock of Orpingtons too. Blake's trying to get me to do the Morans. He's got a nice flock of Morans up there. I know nothing about that breed. I mean, I know them when I see them at shows and so on, but I have no personal history of raising Morans. So I don't know what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean the New Hamp seems to be the winner, or the Delaware, from what I've seen, because you can get pretty close to a 4-pound carcass on the
Yep.
cockerels at 14 or 15 weeks. If under
So
good
the new
management,
you can do them at 12.
yeah, under good management, good feed, and all that, you can, you don't have to wait forever on the New Hamps or the Delawares. So, yeah.
But those would be the ones that, try to get you what you can. And if you like them, once you get them going, then make sure that you go back and get, don't go crossing them up with everything. Not, I encourage people to get a copy of the standards. I encourage people to join the APA. It's the oldest agricultural organization in America. Read up about, if you choose the New Hampshire, or if you choose the Delaware, or if you choose the Rhode Island White, that's another good breed. Learn about them, research them, and read the standards. Finding good Rhode Island Whites is a little more difficult. Most of the ones, because they're to be rose combed, and a lot of what I've seen coming out of hatcheries are single combed and about half the size they should be.
You
There's a
don't really
good
want one
breed,
out of a
there's a
hatchery.
good Rhode Island White Club. They can do that too. You can search and go to the Rhode Island White Club and contact some of the people that are focusing on that breed. There's a Plymouth Rock Club. It's probably one of the oldest clubs in America. But just make sure you have and learn what they should look like, how they should be built, what should they weigh at 10 weeks, what should they weigh at 16 weeks, what should their breeding weight be. A good barred rock rooster should weigh 9.5 pounds, and if it doesn't, don't breed with him. So, it's like a good Jersey giant rooster should weigh 12, 14 pounds. So you understand your breed and do the homework it takes to do that.
Yeah, the Jersey Giant takes too long to get there, though. You're not
Yeah,
going to put meat on the table in a hurry with a Jersey Giant. So
no, you won't. It'll be the best eating chicken you ever had.
yeah, that's a true statement. That's a true statement. But
They were my
you're going to
mom's
be
favorite.
really okay.
Yep.
All
She
right,
always
Frank.
liked them because they dressed out 5.5, 6 pounds. Mom didn't care much for fried chicken. She liked roast chicken. And she
Right.
could get 2 young Jersey Giant roosters in a big turkey roasting pan. And that was about 12 pounds of chicken. And she said that was the best eating you ever had.
Yep. Well, it's a lost art to know how to cook those. There's not many people left that know how to. Yeah. So,
is there anywhere that you know of that someone could get some recipes or do some research on how to prepare a heritage bird?
I think one of the important things is go to Abe Books or go to any of these book places or whatever, buy a cookbook printed prior to 1950 and follow what it tells you. Because the industrial, the chicken everybody eats today didn't exist 60 years ago. It's like real fast, one of my friend who's a chef wanted to fix coq au vin, and so he came and got a chicken from me, and he fixed it and brought it back. And I said, "This is awful." I says, "I don't know what you did," but he'd gotten Martha Stewart's cookbook, but it was she revised her cookbook into the 60s to meet the modern industrial chicken. I told him, take that chicken back, put it back in the pot with all that stuff, cook it for another 3 hours and bring it back. Jed, him and his wife, because she's the chef and she's a graduate from culinary school. And she has mastered, she's worked hard to come up with lots. But if you can get a cookbook that was printed in the 20s or 30s and follow it, pay attention to those temperatures and that time it takes to cook them. Now you can, the thing was to get fried chicken done back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, you had pan fried, bread the chicken, put the lid on it, steam it, and break it down, and then bring it back up crisp again. Well, his big secret is he learned how to pressure cook, pressure fry, because he started with Plymouth Rocks. He didn't have industrial broilers. And he cut the cooking time down in half by learning how to fry that chicken in a pressure cooker. So if they get one of my chickens and they say it's tough, and I said, well, then you ruined it. You didn't know how to cook it, or you didn't pay attention to what I told you.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things you can do is you can take that chicken, cut it up, put it in a pressure cooker, pressure it under about 60 pounds for about 5 minutes, turn it off, let it cool off, put it in the refrigerator, then take it back out and bread it and put it in the frying pan, and you'll have fried chicken as tender as you want in about 15 minutes. So there are ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Either low and slow, or you pre-cook it,
Yep.
pressure cook it, just like you said, and then as soon as it cools off, you can bread it, and you just finish frying it to crisp it up. It's really already cooked, but yeah. So
It's been around for 200 or 300 years.
Yep.
And they didn't have this modern industrial chicken up until about in the early 60s. So all those years before and all those hundreds of chickens my mom fried and we ate every Sunday, they were barred rocks, or we ate a lot of fried leghorns. They were as good and tender. People don't know how to cook anymore.
Yep.
That's true too.
They're used to eating baby birds. That's what everybody has today. That little chicken that 4-pound chicken you buy at the grocery store is only 6 weeks old when it was killed. So it's just
Frank,
a little baby bird, a whole bunch of flab and fat.
Frank, we're
No
at our
protein.
time. We're at our time for the show. Anyway, one last, just give them the most important advice for starting the adventure you're on. What's the best tidbit you can give them?
Determine what your goal is. What is it you want to do? And then pick a breed that just delights you. You just love watching it. And you'll put up with all kinds of things. If that barred rock pattern speaks to you, or if that Rhode Island Red pattern speaks to you, or when you look through the standard book and you're just blown away by the beauty of the light brahma, then become the best light Brahma breeder that you can become. And before you and master that, spend time studying, talk to other breeders, talk to people that have been at it for a long time. You can learn so much by doing that. And try to buy from individual breeders, if at all possible. And get to know
probably
that
not.
person. Know it's
Probably
about.
not at the poultry show, though, right?
Well, it all depends on what the breed is. You know, some of the breeds haven't been screwed up yet, and some of them have. Because a 4-foot tail on a Leghorn rooster is not going to produce you any more eggs. May be pretty in the cage, but it ain't going to do nothing for that utility, for that egg production. Sometimes, though, even if you get some of those, hidden within the genes of that bird is its ancestor. And if you breed select, you can bring it back out again. I would say a lot of those shorebirds are probably closer to their ancestor than what you're going to get from a catalog.
That's true.
Now, some of the really not odd, that's not fair, the more unusual varieties like the Kubaleas or the Crevicors or the Chameaux or some of those breeds from the catalog usually aren't too bad because they're so rare and there's so few of them. They haven't messed them up. What they've messed up is what I call the historical American utility breeds, the old working chickens of America, the Barred Rocks, the New Hamps, the Delawares, the true American breeds, the Wyandottes. Those are the ones that are screwed up and are really and need a lot of work. The ones that fed America for the first 100 years. So, but first of all, fall in love with the breed that you pick, and just and also make sure you have a good clue of what you want that bird to do, and what that bird is capable of doing. If you just want a bunch of eggs, well, then get whatever. Buy the catalog Barred Rocks and that have been selected for egg production. They're half the size, but they're not going to be meat birds.
No.
And I'm all about preservation. I'm all about saving genetic diversity. And so that was the main thing I had, about 25 years ago, I began to realize all the people that I knew that I got turkeys from my whole life were all dying and disappearing, and along with them, all their birds. So I'm very proud that my bronze turkeys have been here on this farm in Kansas since 1917. And I'm working really hard to save them from extinction, because once they're gone forever. You can never bring them back. So
Frank, we appreciate your time, and we appreciate you coming on and telling us about what you've got going on and telling us about the heritage breeds. We certainly do appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you. If they have any questions, then go to the website to Good Shepherd Conservancy and get a hold of Chad.
All right. That sounds
Thanks, sir.
great.
Have a nice evening.
All right. Thanks
Thanks
you.
for coming on.
Thank you for
All right.
sharing.